Thumbs up. Okay, I think I am good to go. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm gonna do this again. Good afternoon, everybody. I understand that after lunch might be a little tired, and I have the privilege and honor to keep you guys awake for the next 40 to 50 minutes. I'm going to try my best. So, my name is Rashad Young. I am a counselor in training. I'm also a WICS Scholar here at Webster University. First off, I want to just say thank you to Webster University for the opportunity. Special shout out to Dr. Martin for giving me the opportunity about the WICS Scholars Program I had no idea about when I first got here. And she told me something in August of last year, like, it's an opportunity for you about WICS, and being a part of it truly has been a great thing. I know this is live stream, Mom, if you're watching, hi. She was like, you have a presentation today? I'm like, yeah, I realized I didn't tell you, so it's gonna be on live stream. She's like, you want me to come? No, do not come. But it really is truly an honor to be here. I'm really grateful. And also my supervisor's here for my internship. I'm going to shout her out in the back. Jasmine, thank you so much. Representing the Community Reach, which is a great organization. A special shout out to Ebony, who's the founder of it. So this presentation is a little bit unique for me. So I'll give a little background of myself. I've talked about this topic a couple times in conferences. This is the first time from a clinical perspective. So a little bit about me. I'm a school counselor by day. For those who know about St. Louis, you always ask about what high school you go to. I went to CBC, and I now work at CBC. So to be back at my high school, I never thought I would do it. Like, I never thought I would be there ever in my life. But they called me in 2023 or the beginning of 2024 about the opportunity. I was really grateful to be back. So I work with kids all over the St. Louis area. It is an all-boys school. You look at social economics, they are coming from a predominantly white background. You may assume that they're usually affluent. However, I would like to say we have kids coming from all over. But anyways, technology and teenagers is a very unique conversation alone, right? So just thinking about what that looks like, the space of mental health. Kids are all over the place with phones. You have school, have different policies taking away phones and stuff like that. But from a clinical perspective, we don't necessarily talk about the inequities that happen when it comes to technology. There's an assumption that everybody knows how to use a phone, right? Or a computer, or a laptop. And in being a counselor in training, I am discovering that actually there's still a gap, which is why I think this presentation is so important to me. Because at the end of the day, just working with marginalized community, being a black man myself, I understand the responsibility that I have. I've been told by numerous people that I'm a unicorn in this space. Representation is, well, thank you for that. That's good. It's affirming. It is a responsibility and a privilege that I know that I have, and I really try to take it very serious. So again, I do appreciate the opportunity to have this presentation. I want to focus more so on a few things. So I call it the digital divide because we talk about a lot of divides here. The most common divide in St. Louis you hear about is like the Delmar divide, right? Like housing, right? But the digital divide I think is important because again, we talk about access and technology all the time, but we don't talk about the division that happens within that. So we're going to talk about that, and obviously the ecological model is usually the framework in this entire session, all the sessions. We're also going to talk about the mental health impacts and the effects due to the digital inequities. We don't talk about that enough, like clients feeling ashamed for not having the opportunity to connect. And I'm gonna get into all those other things, barriers, etc. We're also gonna consider political, clinical, and research implications and identify cultural responsive strategies for underserved communities, or reserved communities, I'm sorry. And I think the reason why is, we're good? Oh, it's not on, jeez. And this is why I don't live stream. Okay, we good? Okay, so my mama heard my voice, but she's gonna see the screen. Okay, Mama, I'm sorry if you're watching. Let's see. Good.
Yeah, we should be.
Should be. Think so? Okay. Good. All right. Perfect.
All right.
So similar to what I was telling a few people in here, I definitely understand the professor perspective right now. There's a whole bunch of people sitting all over the place. But I like to have this a little bit engaging and involving. You're going to see me for the next 40 to 50 minutes. I don't think you want to hear me only talk alone for the next 40 to 50 minutes. But also we have people with different backgrounds within counseling, education, administration, professors. And I think it's really important to try to gain that insight. So I will be looking for some participation for the next 2 to 3 minutes. I got a couple questions for you guys to consider. First question: what do you think is the digital divide from your perspective? Share a few things, but from your perspective, what would you consider the digital divide? I used to be an elementary school teacher too, so I can wait. Access. People who don't have access to technology. Yes, absolutely. Anybody else? Stable internet connection. Yes. Jasmine. Digital equity skills. Absolutely. Yeah, digital literacy, 100%. I saw your hand in the back. Yes. Yes, the separations between online and reality, I think, is very important. Anybody else? Okay, second question. What do you think gets left out of digital mental health care and why? Oh, okay. Right. People who do not get access to it, but who gets left out of it? Senior citizens. Okay. Yes. Anybody else? Youth. Young people. 100%. Okay, it's a good question. People thinking good. People in underserved areas who don't have the internet connection, don't have technology. Yes. Marginalized populations, everyone. Yes. Severe diagnosis clients may not have the efforts or the resources to understand what they're navigating. And my final question: what assumptions do we make about tech in the communities that we serve? Yes, there is a yes, there is a mass assumption. Anybody else? Okay, give me 1 second. I don't know why the okay. Might have to transition. Let me make sure. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Perfect. All right. So I like to start off each presentation with a quote or something that kind of set the parameters. So I wanted to talk about equity. So equity is not giving everyone the same tool, it's giving them the right tool for their context. And so a famous picture, it's been altered a little bit, but it's a famous picture that I like to use, one, because I'm a baseball guy, but two, I think this speaks so much volumes, is because we think about equality and equity, and I think a lot of times we focus on the wrong thing. Equality matters, 100%, right? Everybody should get the same opportunity to do the same things, to be a part of something. However, when you don't have the proper tools, you can see there's still limitations that are placed. So the reason why I think this picture is important is because, again, when you give people the proper resources, not only are they getting the actual opportunity from an equal sense, they're also getting the resources properly to get a vantage point or the resources for the help and things that they need. So this picture has always been important to me. So to talk about the digital divide, we kind of mentioned a few things, but I think we already kind of covered. But I like to say there's 5 different gaps that I think are very important. We have the access gap, which you mentioned, the affordability gap, the digital literacy skills gap, the usage gap, and the equity gap. So the access and usage gap, we don't often talk about high quality internet enough. I know some of us have been with clients where the connection is not working, where you're in the middle of a session and it just cuts off, or your internet cuts off, and it can be frustrating. But I think about those who are trying to get the help and they don't have the resources. Maybe they're in a car in a parking lot outside of McDonald's or a Starbucks because that's the best space that they have. And maybe for that particular day, Starbucks internet's just not working because everybody wants a matcha at 10 o'clock in the morning, right? And they're trying to do their work. But we don't think about the beautiful thing about high quality persistence internet. I don't know if people have Spectrum. I have Spectrum, it goes out all the time, right? But people are spending a lot of money for high quality internet. So from a statistical standpoint, 95% of adults with household incomes of $100,000 have home broadband internet. I want to point out two things. First is the household incomes of $100,000. We have to keep in mind that some people don't have families that have $100,000 within their household income. There's people that are navigating the poverty line. So if you look at it from another perspective, only 57% of adults with household incomes below $30,000 have broadband internet. So a little bit of perspective about me, or I guess a story about me. I used to work in the St. Louis public schools. That's what got me into education. I was an elementary school teacher for 6 months. I found out really quick, as much as I love those kids, I could not do it, right? But the biggest thing, though, was that being in that environment, you assume because of the things that school is giving them, that when they go back home, they're going to have the same thing. That's not always the case. So what I like to mention from the financial standpoint, again, is that when you have more money, you usually have more access to resources. And you also are getting that information for those resources as well. Second part, smartphone dependency. 31% of adults earning $30,000 or less than $30,000 rely solely on their smartphones for internet access. Some people are using their phones for hotspots. What do we know about hotspots? They don't always work. What if you're driving or when you're traveling? It can easily go out being in a rural area or in the middle of nowhere or by a forest or a mountain or whatever. But if that is your only way of reliable internet, again, imagine the opportunities that could be cut out in those situations. Just 6% of adults making $100,000 or more are smartphone dependent. We think people who make more money have the resources and the knowledge to utilize their phones better. That's not always the case. So we have to keep that in mind. There's a lot of massive assumptions because when we tie in money and social economic status, that people know exactly what they're doing. And yes, it's like a million iPhones, but everybody doesn't have an iPhone 16. Some people have the iPhone 10 still, which I don't know how they still operate and they still work. But again, maybe that's all they have. Maybe that's all they can afford at that moment. We have to keep that in mind. So from a racial perspective, 83% of white people or the white population has broadband access, 84% Asian, 75% Hispanic, 68% Black. And then we look at it from a community standpoint, 86% suburban living, 77% urban living or downtown living, and then 73% of rural living have access to internet. Again, there can be massive assumptions just because you live in a certain population that you have internet access, but also you know exactly what you're doing and also being able to provide the resources for others moving forward. So there's a big affordability gap, and I kind of mentioned from a usage standpoint, but I like to make it very clear about this percentage. 58% of unconnected households cite costs as the primary barrier. Again, inflation's high already as it is. The internet and other systems are going up. Phone systems, subscriptions, everything is going up at a high rate. People don't necessarily have the ability to sustain the purchases for these payment plans of the internet, technology, etc. And then also 7 million people in the U.S. live in households that cannot afford broadband. That was a study in 2024. A lot has happened between 2024 and 2025. So I would argue that we're in the middle of a recession. So I would imagine by 2026 that those numbers will go up just a bit. Again, as we mentioned, the digital literacy gap. 33% of Americans lack basic digital skills. I still have to help my mom with Apple Pay. Right? And I love you, Mom. I'm sorry if you see that. But again, I have the ability to help people with that. Does not mean that somebody else has the ability to do so. We have an assumption, again, that because kids are more iPhone dependent and Apple dependent, that they can rely that message to adults to understand. Think about somebody you work with Zoom, and they're talking and they're still on mute, right? That's a very common theme, and you would assume that somebody knows what they're doing. People are struggling to still share screens. Imagine when the advancement of AI comes into place, when we talk about different things in this space. As we know that, mental health, the rise of mental health and counselors are going to go up another substantial amount within the next 10 years. It's a very popular field that's constantly growing. There was a presentation earlier today where we discussed about AI and the usage of AI. Now, it has already been a thing. It's only advancing. And there's some people who are still anti-AI. Now imagine if you don't know how to use it now, what that will look like in the next 10 years for your skills. And to find ways to help people understand how to use it for themselves as well. And I'll discuss that from a barrier standpoint shortly. 41% of adults without a high school diploma or digitally illiterate. Right? We think about education being the foundation of things. However, are we educating people properly on how to utilize their technology? I would argue we don't. Assumption that they know what they're doing. So I'm going to transition a bit. I'd like to discuss about the therapeutic side of things. I think it's really important that we realize, again, the work that we do is very important. And I like to, again, continue to set a foundation. With a quote, therapy can't be a luxury for the connected. It must be a right for the disconnected. When we think about therapy, everybody does not have the opportunity to use it. Right? We can think of so many different aspects which causes people to not want to use it at all. There's cultural standpoints, right? How people were raised, the stigmas behind it, proper representation. Some people are just fearful of just filling out a job form note for intake. I've had people come to me or contact somebody about me saying, "Can he help me with this? I don't know what to fill out. I don't know about my insurance. I don't know X, Y, and Z." And again, the questions on there you would assume are pretty standard. But some people don't necessarily know how to navigate that properly. So I think this is important. This was a study that came out in 2023. Again, I would assume that this will continue to go up. And this is who uses therapy from a percentage standpoint. 50% of white adults receive mental health services. 39% of black adults receive mental health services. 36% of Hispanic adults receive mental health services, and 36 Asian adults receive mental health services. Again, this was a study in 2023. What does that mean to me? Is that we still have a large gap of people just utilizing the access to therapy. Again, this is what we are called to do. This is what we love to do, right? But how do we get people to, I guess, make the gap or close the gap a bit better? And so when you think about people who come to therapy, there's various reasons, right? You have anxiety and depression. Usually 60% of people are struggling with one of those things. Stress management, which I think is predominantly big in Gen Z. And what's the next one to Gen X? And Gen X, the next one after that, X, Y, Z. Millennials, trauma recovery, personal growth and self-discovery, relationship issues, right? So we know why people are coming to therapy, but again, I'm going to talk about in a couple of slides later, there's been an emergence of rising in telehealth. More people are using online-based programs to receive therapy. Again, though, how are we making those connections for those who need to be reached? Another quote, these numbers aren't just statistics or indicators of who gets to heal and who remains unseen. Again, the highest was 50%. The rest were in the 30s. There's still a large gap of individuals who are not receiving opportunities for proper mental health care. So a hidden barrier, and we kind of talked about a couple of assumptions, which I think is really important. And from a clinical standpoint, as a counselor and trainer, I've had to work on these assumptions myself. Again, one, having stable Wi-Fi, owning a laptop or a tablet. I've had clients that try to use the phone for online services. People are calling in between those online services. They're disrupting the moment of connection within our sessions. Understanding how to use digital platforms. Some people have never heard of therapy notes or simple practice. Finding ways to access that is always a challenge. And then mainly, I would say having privacy in their home for virtual sessions. You'd be very surprised how many people are interrupting sessions because of their household arrangements, especially in communities where you may be struggling and also below the poverty line and there's multiple people in the house. Are they actually getting an opportunity to have those therapeutic connections with their clinicians properly while online? Because again, a big part of our job is building that connection. It's already difficult to build that connection online. You can't always read body language online. You can't always read the stress online. And so your job really is to try to bridge that gap. But when you have certain barriers in mind, as clinicians, it can be frustrating at times when you feel like you're building progress with a client and something disrupts it. Then they don't come back for 3 weeks or a month. You can't get a hold of them no more. You try to call them, you try to text them, you try to email them. They don't have, they're not connecting with you, so that can impede the progress. The reality, though, is that we have to remember again. I think, especially those who are struggling from a digital literacy standpoint, some of the embarrassment that they may have, some of the things that they feel like they may struggle with, and I also want to mention a couple of things that are other barriers. So again, stigma and systemic mistrust. Again, the importance of having that representation. The cost is another thing as well. I know that that's something that some people don't feel like they're really open to go to therapy about. Insurance coverages and then technology is usually the biggest one. And then sometimes it's just the time constraints. It's just the times that are allowed. Maybe you're a clinician that sees people in person from this time in the morning to the afternoon, but they need mornings for in-person sessions because they can't do online, right? Things like that. Things to consider. But from a clinician standpoint, these are some things that are some barriers. Scheduling fatigue. Let's say it's number one. Almost doing a full year of my internship. It took a while. It took a while. She knows. It took a while to build that clientele consistently, right? And then when you're with a organization or practice, there is a expectation at times that you're constantly getting those clients. You're meeting with them, right? So when you're making that progress, and then there's something that is causing that barrier, especially in my case, it's usually been some sort of form of communication, or they changed an email, or their phone broke, or their parents took their phone, because I have kids that I work with as well, and I can't get a hold of them. That kind of ruins the flow of things. The no-show misconceptions, I've had to really work on that. I would think anybody who's an intern in here can understand that, or a counselor in training, when every hour essentially counts. Every hour, every opportunity you get essentially counts. And then we can easily mislabel them as avoidant for not showing up. And then when you finally get a chance to get a hold of them, you try to be open and give them grace. Not say, oh, well, you haven't been to therapy in a while. Again, you still want to build that rapport and trust with them to make sure they feel involved. But also when they have tech issues, I've had several instances like that. One of them, a kid threw their phone in the toilet. I was wondering why I didn't hear from them for like 6 weeks. Not a story I would imagine would happen, but those things can happen and also can cause a barrier, especially if their financial situation is not in connection to getting something the next day. Some people don't have insurances on their phone. Find ways to save money. Documentation disparities as well, I think, is a big one. Again, when you're having the intake forms and stuff like that, some clients, because they may be overwhelmed with the technology standpoint, they're not necessarily putting everything in a truthful sense. They're just kind of getting enough so you can kind of figure it out later. However, the more honest a client can be, the more you can kind of help them as you kind of guide them through the intake process. So that's a big one. Confidentiality risk, technology and things of that nature, and informed consent and therapeutic alliance, which I always mention is the biggest one, when especially technology is at the helm of everything. So as I kind of mentioned, there's a couple of things I'd like to say. There's always a mental effect when it comes to this. Again, we have the privilege and the honor to be helpers and healers for those in need, whether it's in our communities or communities all over St. Louis. And really, I always try to be empathetic when it comes to the clients that I work with, right? Because I am starting to understand that everybody does not have the access to these things. So these are just a couple of quotes that really stood out to me through research. And what's this going on? Again, a couple of mental health effects. Shame and self-blame. I always say that's the biggest one. clients feeling the need to want to, honestly, like terminate themselves from utilizing therapy services. I haven't been here in 2 months. I don't think I need it anymore. But again, the connection with that, I haven't had the access to reach out to you. Lower self-worth and anxiety and avoidance. I always will say other mental health effects as well that I think people should take into consideration. As clinicians, we do have a ethical obligation, though, I will say. We have ethical obligation to try to be persistent in our ways of finding ways to connect with clients better, to be more resourceful, and I'll talk about policies and stuff in a bit. Um, but how do we find ways to bridge this gap? Because again, the divide is significant. A lot of people are needing help finding ways to be reached. And so, biggest thing I would say, the second slide, is reflecting on our own digital privilege. If we talk about privileges from a racial standpoint and social economic standpoint, we don't always talk about a digital standpoint. I have a working phone. I have two laptops, a work computer and a regular computer. I have different things that I can use if something does not go right. And so again, the reminder that we have to find ways to meet our clients where they're at, and if they need assistance, to be an assistance to them. And I'll even take it a step further. I mean, even for us who are in school currently still, we may not necessarily have the access that our colleagues may not know about. Talking to them, asking for help. Somebody who could have been working on this presentation had to go to a library maybe to do it. Again, we can have an assumption because people are in certain places that they have the access to things properly. I think something that I have learned to do when I have talked to clients is ask them, how tech accessible are you? Like how would you rate your technology skills 1 out of 10? And then the 7-year-old's like, oh, 10, I got it. I'm on YouTube, on everything, right? And that's fine, like that's great. But then maybe there's a 30-year-old client with two kids, two toddlers. Like I'm kind of tech savvy, but I got kids I have to take care of and consider as well. So sometimes I may not have the funds to pay for my internet because I gotta make sure I take care of them. So again, when you have those conversations at times, to me, I believe those are ways to bridge that gap to create that therapeutic alliance and things like that. And then also, I think based off those conversations, you ask the proper questions in regards to finding ways to be flexible. Maybe you cannot be seen over therapy notes, a simple practice of Zoom. How does a phone call work? Is that beneficial for you? Is there a number that I can reach? Is there somebody else involved that can be kind of a village, per se, to helping you in that process? So, the cultural response and the strategies for underserved communities. I think the biggest thing is always representation. I know as clinicians, we talk about the importance of representation. I'm always coming with a question: are we practicing what we're preaching? We talk about representation, but are we giving those who want to be an assistance to others in need the proper skills, the proper training, the proper ability to have the access to be in help in need? Um, Again, it's a fundamental truth. Counseling is still a predominantly white space. It is, and then we take it a step further. For most people to feel comfortable, they would like to be with somebody that either looks like them, sounds like them, or comes from that background. All right, so I know that's a bigger picture thing. That's not just one side's fault, but it is a question that we have to ask ourselves: are we actually utilizing the resources that we have to give people those chances who want to be a help in need? Community-based care models, working with schools. I think Dr. McCoy's speech this morning was fantastic. All the work he's doing is truly inspirational to see all the things within the community connecting with those people to give people the opportunity to have access to things. A lot of great schools, a lot of great non-for-profits, a lot of great practices in the St. Louis area alone. Are we utilizing our resources to give people the chance to receive proper mental health care? That is the fundamental question I think we have to ask ourselves. And I know it's not just one person's responsibility alone. I think that's one of the reasons why I truly have enjoyed being at the community reach. I know that sounds like a plug, but it is kind of. But truly, her vision, Ebony's vision, was to get out to the community. In the past few weeks, we had a very tragic incident with the tornadoes. We have lost homes. Outside of us, have been other great clinicians and practices that have given people who have suffered from the tornadoes free therapy sessions. Maybe for the first time. It doesn't may not change everything, but it gives them something to connect with, to be seen and not feel like they're being forgotten about. Because again, it's very easy to do that in these type of situations. Language and communication access, I think, is another big one as well. We don't talk about it as much, I don't believe, and I think maybe because we're Midwest, I think Midwest is more black and white versus like a California or a Texas. But not every client that comes to us can speak English properly, right? Are we giving them the resources and the access to make sure they're fully understanding and comprehending what is being said, right? So we already have a technology gap, but also like, are we giving them the proper things outside of like a Google Translate to make sure they're understanding what is being asked of them or what's being said, et cetera. And then lastly, technology and accessibility equity. Again, offering tech literacy classes, I think, would be a great thing. Somebody who loves technology, maybe some young kid in high school, right, that loves to talk about this, I'm sure people will eat that up. I know parents, especially where I'm at, the conversation with phones and stuff like that, some parents really don't have no idea how to use their phone and understanding what their kids are doing. What if we had tech literacy classes to give them a chance to understand how to operate their phone properly, right? As updates go on, I think the phone gets more confusing, right? iOS 7 looks different than iOS 22. And what is being used looks a lot different. So how do we find ways to make sure we're giving them those things? And then also, I would say advocate for policies that expand broadband access. And I'll talk about that in a bit. Switching over to telehealth, going to another quote. Telehealth isn't just a platform, it's a lifeline, but a lifeline only works if everyone can reach it. So from a percentage standpoint, obviously COVID played a big role in, I would say, the explosion of telehealth because life changed, right? So people found ways to be adaptable. A study in 2023, 38% of therapy sessions in the US were conducted via telehealth. Over 60% of mental health providers now offer hybrid or fully virtual services. The world is changing. It's starting to become more accessible, starting to make it easier for conditions to reach out to people. During COVID, telehealth sessions increased by 1,384%. And it's going to continue to expand because it's making people's lives easier. A lot of clinicians are now going full telehealth because they don't have to pay for the overhead of a building, especially most of their clients or being seen virtually. People are starting to realize, like, oh, I can have a full-time therapy business without actually physically seeing my client. Again, depending on your mission of your practice or whatever you're doing, you have to ask yourselves, are we making sure that those people that maybe come in have the access to it? Who's using telehealth therapy? I would like to say the discovery ages of 18 to 34. I would also mention that rural residents are also using telehealth sessions typically too, because when you think about small towns, how many of those small towns have 5 or 6 therapists? Sometimes they only have maybe 1 or 2 within that town, right? So people are trying to find ways to expand because again, availability and therapeutic alliance is very important. And another percentage I missed out on. Black and Latinx clients were significantly less to access telehealth therapy due to, again, tech barriers. Something to keep in mind. So, why is this important? Obviously, convenience is big. Again, people's lives are changing. People have kids, other responsibilities. Also, is to reduce the stigma of therapy itself. Again, some people have their views on therapy when they think about you just sitting on one of those 2 chairs and there's somebody like, well, tell me about your problems with a notebook. Some people like to feel comfortable in their own homes to be able to express the things that we can help them with moving forward. And obviously a contingency of care, which help maintains care during public health crises or emergencies, which I think is why telehealth is another big thing. So now going to the ecological model, another quote, should be the last one. Barriers to care don't exist in isolation. The ecological model reminds us that mental health access is shaped by the systems surrounding each individual, from the Wi-Fi in their home and to the policies in their state. So as we discuss the ecological model all day, and it'll continue to be discussed, there's obviously various steps in that model. There's individual, there's microsystem, there's mesosystem, there's exosystem, macro system, and chrono system. And I want to talk about how that connects with the digital divide. So from an individual standpoint, so from a child and youth, anxiety using telehealth may be overwhelmed by forms of tech platforms. That's one. From a microsystem standpoint, parent lacking digital skills or English proficiencies. There are some schools that are offering therapy services, but virtual. Again, there's people who have different responsibilities where being in person can be a barrier itself. So when you have the tech piece, I think that also adds another standpoint. Also, teachers assigning digital resources that some students can't access. Snow days. A lot of these schools, instead of trying to get snow days, they're trying to call them virtual learning days. Big deal. And then there's a kid that swears up and down that they cannot access it. And then there's a natural assumption where you're at home, so you gotta have access to that. And maybe they don't. Their parents are trying to help, they're getting frustrated. They're trying to contact the teacher. It's not always cohesive. Do we have videos to give them a step by step on how to troubleshoot? If they have problems accessing it, can we give them a paper copy of this assignment? And I get it, like a lot of schools are trying to shift away from paper, but things to consider. Again, telehealth being disrupted by poor internet. From a meso system standpoint, schools and providers struggling to coordinate care, trying to get in contact with people to help. Maybe let's say there's a school or a private practice trying to offer a resource to somebody that they know will be a good resource. Maybe there's issues being connected or getting in contact with them. And again, maybe the situation could be urgent. When you don't have the proper resources or the ability to have tech literacy, that can be a problem. My biggest one I would love to say is virtual IEP meetings or intake sessions or family sessions that may have family from out of town or whatever, or they're at work when they're coming working with a client, especially like a child client. Those barriers are often in the way from a virtual standpoint. The exosystem, budget limits for school devices or clinical health tools. Again, they can also limit clinicians for doing their work properly. That can be something to consider. Limited access to public computers or Wi-Fi. And then lastly, I would say broadband deserts in low-income areas and systemic racism shaping digital infrastructure. Things to be considered. So some notable policies. So again, while there's a lot of uh, things that can change, there's some improvements. There have been some things that have been in place. So the ACP program has offered up to $30 a month off of broadband, plus a $100 device stipend for low-income families. Again, it is a resource to help families who may be in need for good broadband access. Over 20 million people are enrolled. That's a statistic in 2024. There's a Lifeline program, essentially offering subsidized phone and internet for low-income rural and tribal populations. Internet deserts are real. And then the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act in 2021, $65 billion was allocated to expand broadband nationwide. So again, there are people and policies that are in place. However, there's still some gaps you have to consider. So limited mental health targeting. Research is unique and it's kind of subjective in the sense, and it's oftentimes controlled because it's not usually a nationwide research standpoint. But most programs don't explicitly address mental health, digital mental health barriers. How the divide is still affecting people. Again, the shame, the isolation, navigating those hardships. Sustainability issues. Again, funding being cut due to the changes in policies today. not-for-profits or communities or other things like that. Their funds are potentially being cut. And then the digital literacy that's being undervalued. Again, are we actually having the proper training that is utilized for those people? So what can we do? We can expand broadband infrastructure. Again, invest in affordable high-speed internet for rural and urban populations. Again, provide financial assistance for not only communities but also people who are in need. Fund digital literacy programs. I think every school should have that within the next 10 years. I don't see why that's not possible. I also think that with all the beautiful organizations and community based reach programs, we should have that for our clients as well, to find different spaces to give them that access for mental health care. Mandate equity in telehealth and mental health access. Pretty much require culturally responsive care standards and equitable telehealth for reimbursement policies and things of that nature. And then obviously encourage public-private partnerships, collaborate with community, government, and et cetera, to pretty much, again, extend and expand those telehealth systems. So takeaways from counselors as we conclude: be aware, be flexible, be culturally responsive, be an advocate, and be a bridge. I think, again, at the end of the day, this is one of many conversations that we can have. It is a big one because, again, the use of technology is only going to go up. The advancement of technology is only going to go up. And the gap in between those who have the access and being accessible will continue to go down if we don't have the proper channels of funding, allocation of access, and also distributing it in a way that is literate for those. And that concludes presentation with 8 minutes to spare. Good. Any questions? Got 8 minutes. If not, I appreciate you guys. Hmm? Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. No, definitely. I think that's a huge thing. I think, again, tech literacy within this space can continue to expand. Obviously, it will probably require people to be at the forefront to want to do that. Something I've learned at working in schools, that a lot of people have a lot of great ideas, don't nobody want to be the ringleader and try to execute it. So that's the biggest thing. But I think it is big though, especially for clinicians and practitioners to work with that. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. You know, that's a valid point. I didn't think about that. Need a microphone? Okay. Anybody else got any comments? I realized y'all said some gems and nobody heard it online. I appreciate that. Well, it's live stream, so you gotta make sure.
But I think on a see how loud that is. On another level, when you think about when we're seeking funding,
Yeah.
and we have this in mind, where we will put funds in place to be able to address this barrier, because it is a serious barrier. And if we have the funds to be able to provide the internet for a family who doesn't have it, provide a tablet or a phone for a family who doesn't have it, it will really make way for them to receive those services.
Oh, 100%. Allocating the funds properly. Again, asking the fundamental question, are we utilizing all the things that we have to ensure and empower our clients best, or, our colleagues and other practitioners? Any other comments before we wrap up? Darcy, good.
Hey, this is on. Thanks for your presentation, Rashad. So I have a question. Is there any talk about having safe spaces in community spaces for people to come and then do telehealth from there? So those spaces might have reliable internet. Also, I work in substance abuse. If we provide some clients or their children tablets or laptops, those things might get sold.
Right. Yeah.
So then the access is gone again.
Yeah, because then again, obviously, if something happens, it's like, one thing happens and they shut down everything else.
It's almost like a library, but
Kind of.
not all communities have libraries.
I think it is possible. Again, I think it's how we utilize our funds properly, especially for those who are in probably more successful positions to do that. I think, again, mental health is a collaborative thing. So if people work together, these things can happen. It's no different than any other business venture. Again, if it's for the benefit of the community, as we say that we do this for, how are we not putting that together? I think that's $1 million question, but I think it is very possible. Then we got enough for one more comment, and I gotta go. Two more. We got maybe two more. I'll say.
Hello. Don't love speaking into a microphone.
It's a great
That's
time.
a whole
Right?
other layer. So something just got me thinking about the standard in the code of ethics about not financially profiting off of the work that you do with your client. And it just kind of brought the thought into my mind of when you do bring that third party service of any sort of telehealth communications company into it, or even using Wi-Fi, it's no longer just those two people in the room. Now you have an entity that is a for-profit business and is there to make money off of that relationship and that interaction. So how do you maintain the ethics there and make sure that the financial concerns aren't playing a bigger part than the counselor's responsibility to the client?
You're asking me, is that an open-ended question?
I mean,
That's one.
whatever you want to say in response to that. That's just what came to mind for
I'm
me.
like, I'm not a founder. No, I think that's a $1 million question in regards to us working together in that space. Obviously, there's people who are going to look at things from a capitalistic sense. So yeah, people are going to find ways to profit money off of the downfall of people needing mental health services. But I think that question is probably more open-ended for those who can actually probably answer that. But I think, again, just having those conversations, I think that can really bridge that gap. Then we have enough for one more, if there is anything. I know we got another presentation after me. I don't want to.
So this is just a thing I was thinking about, like reentry clients,
Sure.
people who are coming in, maybe being incarcerated for several years or over a decade, and they're literally behind as far as dealing with technology, and then they're going home to families who are above or obviously ahead of them, and then they need a lot of those services they need to deal with their traumas and things like that. Have you
Right.
ever looked into that or had any? I know you deal a lot more with schools.
I'm sure the lady next to you could probably answer that from a community reach standpoint. But no, I think, I'm joking, I'm gonna give a hard time. No, I think something, I've talked about that just in general, people that I know. I think, yeah, rehabilitating or bringing that conversation to light, I think, again, goes back to overly training or having those conversations about the proper trainings with that. So yeah, I'm open to the idea. I would love to do something like that if people that are involved. Again, I think it's a collaborative effort. I appreciate you guys. Like I said, I know we got another one. So again, thank you guys so much. Right.